Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it is, I do hope that you're having a good time. This is the fifth in a series of flips. This flip is about moving from having a topic to looking at the themes in that topic to making them into a useful thesis. So actual thesis sentence construction will go into the next flip, but in this flip we're just going to look at a lot of the methods that you should be thinking about and just explaining them as we go along. So we'll have to do a little bit of review, but after we get to that, we should have plenty to say. So we're going to review the early stages of the paper writing process and learn how to distinguish good and bad use of themes in papers. So in writing a paper, in one of the earliest flips, we said that you start by selecting a topic, then you identify key themes in the topic, then you produce a thesis statement, develop the argument for the thesis statement, outline the paper based on the core argument, draft the paper, revise the introduction and conclusion, and finally edit the paper and then submit it for whatever purpose it has. In this particular flip, we're going to look at how to identify key themes in the topic and use these to produce a thesis statement. So this is review. Within a topic, there are themes and terms that are the relevant ideas for thinking about the topic. These themes frame the topic and the academic discussion around the topic. The goal here is to think about which of the themes interests you the most and how these different themes relate to each other. A theme is a recurring and therefore important idea in the paper or work. For instance, if we're writing about special education, some of the themes could be inclusion, development, and difficulty. If we talk about tax policy, this could be fairness, bankruptcy, and investment. If we talk about forest animals, predators, herbivores, foragers, and nocturnal animals might be themes that we're using. To come up with relevant themes, I find mind mapping to be the most helpful brainstorming technique. We looked at this in class previously. The goal here is to write down as many related things as possible and then to think about what connects the different ideas that fall under the general topic. From previous flips, you know that a thesis is a statement, which is the ultimate conclusion of an argument. Now, a statement must be true or false, and a thesis statement must be something that can be argued and something that must be argued. So this both means that you can make a logical argument that leads to the conclusion, and that the conclusion is not so obvious that your readers will already have the conclusion in mind. The next thing to think about is that themes are not theses. Themes are too obvious to be theses. Also, they do not need to be argued, they're well accepted. Everyone would understand that, say, squirrels and owls and deer fall into the category of forest animals. There's no thesis to be had just by saying these things. As such, they cannot make interesting papers. Western academic writing always has the goal of saying something interesting. The goal is to produce a statement that tells us something interesting about one of the themes, or about the relationship between multiple themes. So we want to look at how to use themes to make better theses. A good mind map will have many ideas related to the topic. The organization of these ideas into groups reveals the themes. If you can find interesting connections, you have a good start in making an interesting thesis. Once you have an interesting thesis, you can develop an argument, write an outline, draft a paper, revise it, and finally submit it to your instructor or to a journal or to whatever venue you're working towards. The task is to make one good argument that convinces your readers of a thesis they did not already believe about a single topic. This may take a lot of argument for just one claim, so I want to share with you an expression that we have, which is don't bite off more than you can chew. The idea here is that if you try to do too much, you're going to be stuck with something in your mouth and just going to be chewing and chewing and you're not going to make any progress. The point is that your thesis should be very narrow. You can help yourself by narrowing the topic. So if you were given the topic Spanish history and culture, this is way too big. So if we just started by restricting to Spanish culture, we would already be looking at pre-Roman Spanish culture with the Carthaginians and the Celts, Spain and the Roman Empire, Gothic Spain, Moorish Spain, Habsburg Spain. We would have all of these different entities to talk about. All of this is way too big, even if you were writing a doctoral dissertation or a book. The odds that you would be able to write such an object are extremely low. Instead, first we need to master the idea of having a very simple argument and making that argument. Topics can be narrowed in a number of useful ways. So one hint is to narrow things geographically, so shrink them in space. Another is to shrink them in time. Another is to pinpoint one particular author or one particular group of authors. Another thing is to make sure we have two things and to compare these two things to find the connection that they have, or even to show that they're different. Either of these things can be useful. Finally, we can have a single application or a very small application in mind. So I want to show you several bad attempts of using a topic as a thesis, and I want to show you how using themes can help you to narrow that. These are not complete theses. These are better narrowed theme-based topics. So again, these are not theses themselves, these are more narrowed theme-based topics. So this would be bad, a paper about English education in all of Hokkaido. Why would this be bad? There's way too much that you could say about this. There are hundreds of schools, tens of thousands of pupils. Instead, a good paper could be this, a paper on whether or not public school English education in Kitami junior high schools adequately prepare students to study abroad during high school. Here we have restricted it in at least two ways. First, we have geography. We've said Kitami. Second, we have said junior high school, and we've said study abroad. So we have shown that we can make a better type of thesis if we can use more themes to make it tighter. So we don't just have one topic, English education in all of Hokkaido, we now have a topic narrowed by several important themes. Again, bad, a paper about English education in all of Hokkaido. This would be bad. Instead, we can narrow this by saying something like this, a paper about whether or not Hokkaido teachers should use ICT to provide remote classroom instruction to remote schools. Here we've added a theme in ICT, and we have used geography to restrict ourselves to remote schools. So we've used two concepts to make things smaller for ourselves. Also, this would be bad, a paper about financial support for mothers and children in Japan. If you are a very large government think tank, and you want to spend millions and millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of yen, maybe you would write a paper like this. If you are a student on any level, this is a bad paper for you. Here's a better paper. A paper about whether or not the Mother and Child Handbook has increased prenatal and infant health between 2007 and 2017. Here we've added the theme of the Mother and Child Health Book, and we've also narrowed the time period, because we're just saying between 2007 and 2017. Another one. This is bad. A paper about Japanese who go abroad. This doesn't help. There's lots of Japanese people that go abroad. There's lots of time periods in which Japanese people have gone abroad. There's lots of reasons why they go abroad. This would be much too large of a topic to be able to give a good thesis about. Instead, a paper about whether or not the number of Japanese people going abroad without using package tours has increased between 2005 and 2015. If we narrow it in this way, we have a much better basis to talk about what's going on. This would also be bad, a paper about Japanese writers' English levels. There's too many different things that can be said about that. Again, we're going to use some themes and some geographical and time-based narrowing to get a better idea of what we could say here. So we're going to add a theme. We're going to talk about logical arguments. We're going to narrow it to one source. We're going to say one writer. Nitobe Inazo. We're going to say just one chapter in one book. So we're going to say Bushido. So now we get a paper by Inazo Nitobe's use of logical arguments in the training and position of women chapter of Bushido. This would be sufficiently small that we can now begin to say something. We could have a statement we could argue for in a reasonably long paper. Next one, a paper about the benefits of classical music. While some people might think there are great benefits, this is going to be hard to argue for in very generic terms. Instead, we're going to want to narrow it by source, one composer, one piece of music. A paper on whether or not we should listen to the entirety of Debussy's suite Bergamesque, not only its famous Clair de Lune movement. So this is much better because it's much narrower. Now we could say something. We could say, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? We could formulate a thesis on this much more specific topic with these themes engaged. So this is a bad one. A paper about Haruki Murakami's short story collection After the Quake. There's several problems with this that make it not functional as a thesis. Instead, we can make it a good thesis. We changed it like this. A paper comparing the relationships of two male characters to one female character in his Honey Pie short story. We've narrowed it by going to only one story, We've also narrowed it to two people's relationships with one person. It's going to be much more manageable to be able to make an argument and to say things about this. Remember, this is not yet a thesis. This is a sufficiently restricted topic that you could write a thesis about. Another one, bad. A paper about English exams. There's lots of English exams all over the world. Many things could be said. That's the problem. Too much could be said. We want to narrow this, so we're going to specifically apply things. So good, a paper about differences in what the speaking section in TOEFL is testing, in contrast to what the speaking section in IELTS is testing. This would give us just two tests, and this would give us one area where they have a lot in common, where we could make smaller grain comparisons, and we could have a thesis. We could say that we think the IELTS test better tests general skills. We could say something like the TOEFL test better tests academic English skills. Either way, we are able to say something, and that's the important part. So this is bad, a paper about vocabulary learning methods. There's a lot of them, too many things could be said, so we want to narrow it down. A paper about whether or not taking a 10-minute rest after 30 minutes of vocabulary learning, followed by another 30 minutes of vocabulary learning, improves memorization. So this would be simpler because it has only one experiment, so this is much better as something you could have a claim about, rather than a very generalized claim about all vocabulary learning. Next, this would be bad, a paper about the types of education in Japan. For one thing, this would just be a list. There's nothing that makes it work. We want to make this narrower by giving some boundaries. A paper about whether or not international schools in Japan should become government-run international schools. So we've added a theme. We've added international schools to education in Japan. We've also added a comparison relation, the idea that they could be privately run or that they could be government run. By adding this comparison, we have greatly improved what we're able to say. So this is also a bad choice. A paper about the use of technology in the classroom. You can make this much better by narrowing it down. A paper about whether or not using iPads in 3 classrooms in Asaikawa has increased student test scores. We've added a theme. We've added iPads, narrowing down use of technology, and we've restricted it to Asaikawa in only 3 classrooms. Next one. A paper about Bushido, the way of the samurai. This is not good because there's a lot of things that could be said. We need to add some more themes so we can more narrowly attack a single claim. So to make it better, a paper about how Kanzo Uchimura's understanding of Bushido applies to changes in studying abroad. Now we're only looking at one thinker, we're not looking at everyone, and we're looking specifically at studying abroad. So we've added 2 things, making it much sharper. Now I want to summarize what we've been talking about. The broader your assigned topic, the more you need to use themes to narrow it to make a viable thesis. The shorter your assigned paper, the more you need to use themes to narrow it to make it a writable paper. So again, the goal here is to make something that you could actually write in the length that you have, both in terms of space to write and in terms of the time that you have to write it. It's a common mistake to try to do far too much. It's better to take something small and handle it very well than it is to try and do too much all at once. So thank you for your attention and watching this video. Again, it's a very small piece of a much bigger pie, but this is a very important piece. This will help you to know how you need to add things in order that you can make a good thesis, and in order that you can hear a topic and then move from topic via theme to thesis, because the goal here is to be able to make a thesis statement, which is something that can be true or false, and that can be the thing you are arguing for. So many non-native speakers of English use the word thesis to refer to, say, a graduation thesis, and we use it that way too. But the reason why we use it that way is that a graduation thesis has gone from a general topic and used themes to come up with a single statement it is trying to prove. And the rest of the long document is actually just trying to prove that one thing. So thank you for your time. I do hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any comments, questions, or other things, please feel free to leave them on the video or to ask in class.